welcome to the panel discussion on the topic of finding PLM to fit mid-sized manufacturers. I am Howie Markson, Director of Mid-Market for the Innovia brand at Dassault Systems, and I am the moderator for this event. With me is Jim Brown, President of Tech Clarity, and Garth Coleman, Vice President of Cloud and Strategic Initiatives at Dassault Systems. Welcome, Jim, and welcome, Garth. Jim recently wrote a very interesting ebook on today's topic. We are going to explore some of the issues in the book with Jim and get Garth's perspective as well. For those mid-sized organizations listening in, the goal of this discussion is for you to better understand some of the factors to consider when looking to improve your engineering and business processes. I'm going to pose a series of questions and ask both Jim and Garth to respond to each one. Okay, let's get started. PDM and PLM sound interchangeable, but they're not. Can you explain, Jim, what these terms mean? And for Garth, what makes the 3D Experience platform different from either PDM or PLM?
Yeah, now you could get lots of different opinions from people on these. PDM or product data management really is, in some ways, the way that companies gain control of their product data. They allow access to it, so people can retrieve it and work on it across engineering teams and share it with others, whether it's other departments but also with others outside of the organization. Product lifecycle management goes further and really manages not just sort of files, which is really where product data management focuses, but manages a more enterprise view, a more holistic approach to products, projects, and processes. So PLM can do a lot more, but you can also start small and get value incrementally from it.
Yeah, and myself, I've actually personally taken this journey from CAD to PDM to PLM, and now what we have in our portfolio, which we call 3D Experience Platform. And as a CAD and PDM guy back in the day, I thought that was the most important thing because the CAD was the most important thing, and that managing all the files and relationships and the complexities of design was like really the nuts and bolts of doing good PDM, and that PLM, the lifecycle management, was just managing the lifecycle of the CAD file. So how are they approved, who can access them, and everything else. But that's really not the case. That's not my opinion now. What I've learned is not really PLM. It's not just a workflow to manage the release of something. Because the CAD file is not just the thing that is the product. It's the representation of the design, but it doesn't have marketing materials. It doesn't have projects, as Jim said. It doesn't have the manufacturing information, the tooling, the service documentation. None of that stuff is there. And when you change any one of those things, it can ripple across any one of those other things. So managing all that through a bill of material, which connects everything together, is really where you begin to manage the life cycle across not just the design, but all the different elements of what makes up the product. And that's really what effective PLM is about. And what we've done with the 3D Experience Platform is two main things on top of that. Number one, we make it what we call model-based. So we take the CAD file and make it much more than just the design specification. We allow the ability to embed behaviors, manufacturing information, allow to simulate the form, fit, and function, to validate the right experiences going on, all the multi-physics simulation, manufacturing planning and execution, all these things done virtually in 3D with no files, no paper, no prototypes. And doing that as model-based is a really core function to take value of that CAD asset. But we also go data-driven to take advantage of all the other processes that aren't around CAD. So we manage the files, but we extract the data out and use that data for all these different enterprise processes, things like ideas management, requirements management, managing the bill of material and the projects and design reviews, and connecting all of that together so that an update anywhere creates a data connectivity and an update across everything else, and everything gets reflected. And we call this invisible governance because you no longer have to track the files and the updates to the files. The data comes to the user, and everybody has the instantaneous update of what's going on, and they can make better decisions. And all of this allows the company to manage much more innovation and manage products less. So what we say is you innovate more and you manage less because you're model-based and data-driven on the 3D Experience Platform.
Great. Okay. Thanks for that explanation. Let's go on to the next question. Can you describe how a mid-sized manufacturer's need for collaboration in the development phase may be different from those of, say, larger companies or even a small two-man shop?
Yeah, I'll start on that. I mean, absolutely. If you think about a smaller, two-man shop, and even as you grow a little bit bigger, you want to be able to take as simple of an approach as you can without, without things falling apart. And in a smaller organization, you can share information. You can talk around the cubicle, or you can yell over the wall. You might be able to have some methods of this is how we name things, or this is where we store things, and you can keep a semblance of control that way. But it really starts to fall apart very quickly as organizations grow, particularly as you start bringing people in from the outside, maybe even if you've got an engineering firm, or you want suppliers to be able to share in some information, update a spec, for example. It starts to fall apart very quickly if you don't have a little bit more formality in the way you share information and the way that information is stored. At the same time, larger organizations need a tremendous amount of process and formality that may be out of reach and may be too much for a mid-sized company. And so you don't want to necessarily have a big, heavy type of a system on top of them. You want to make sure that they're able to remain agile and be able to respond to customers, which is really how those mid-sized companies compete.
Yeah, and I agree 100% with that you need to get away from file-based sharing and get into something a little more structured, but not too much that it's overwhelming. But the other part of this for these companies that are mid-sized is they need to be very agile and flexible to meet the customer need. And this means we need to get really close to the customers. So we need to collaborate in a different way that is still connected. So doing that is not inviting them into the PLM system, which is a formal approval with a formal conversation. We need to do something which is much more open and social and engaging, so we can have casual conversations and then tie that into the platform for structured collaboration around the best ideas that have all the context together. So we're able to do all of that in one system, to have both the structured stuff that you need to really make products, but then the social side to collaborate in and get all the right ideas and validation so that you can make the right products and do that quickly.
Okay, and that sounds like that works well for mid-sized organizations and large companies.
Absolutely.
Okay, that was great. So let's talk about simplicity, because Jim, I think you just brought that up. Everyone wants things simple. We certainly expect that in the personal applications we use. However, a simple PLM solution may not always be the right fit for a mid-sized manufacturing organization. So can you explain why?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at what a lot of mid-sized companies try to do, they try to manage, maybe they've got, something in control, something to control files, maybe a simple PDM system, or maybe they're even trying to use something that it's really tempting, like a Dropbox or Google Drive or something like that, that, allows information, or files at least, to be shared and accessed by others, but they're really just not made to handle the complexities, organizational complexities or process complexities that a mid-sized company has. In fact, they really don't work even in some of the one or two man shops oftentimes because of revisions getting confused and those sorts of things. But too many times we see people trying to email, hey, take a look at this revision, and email a file, whether it's a CAD file itself, or maybe they send some sort of a visualization of it, or they're sharing a spec, and it falls apart so quickly because you start losing everything in this email thread, and people start trying to share something on a thumb drive or some other way, and in the end, what you really need is something that has enough formality to hold together, but as Garth was saying, it needs to be flexible and social to allow a conversation around the product and the product development process.
There's some security issues too there.
Absolutely. I mean, security is a huge thing, and if you look at the things we're comfortable sharing information in our personal lives, if somebody were to share out an extra photo of me with my Aunt Tilda, maybe that's okay. But if that's if that's the IP for my next new product, not okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. Protecting IP is the lifeblood of the jewels of the company. And I would say, with reference to the question, which is, quote, simple, I want to be careful with that term, because simple can mean a lot of different things. I would actually like a system to be simple in terms of simple to use and simple to get access to capability. What I don't want is a system that is very basic and very limited and doesn't give me what I need to get the value today, or prevent me from getting value tomorrow, and allow for things like inadvertent loss of data, or people collaborating with files instead of collaborating through the system, where we can track all those conversations and work with that. So I want something that can meet my needs today, that I can get in there quickly, get immediate value and return on my investment, and then have all of the industrial capabilities that I can pick and choose from to layer in. So if I want to manage my requirements documents as documents today, that's fine. But later on, if I want to go data-driven and manage the requirements as data and start to abstract that and connect all the dots and do those things, that's a possibility. So having that flexibility is really what we do with our system, is that you can take whatever pieces you need to get the value today and know that all those other pieces are available for you just by going data-driven in those other processes.
Yeah, and a system that you can start small in and grow over time allows you to start with some processes that really add value quickly, but don't box you in for the future. And I think that's a lot of times a mistake people find when they look at something that is too basic, too simple in the beginning. And I totally agree with your view on simple to use. It doesn't necessarily mean it can mean that you've hidden complexity and capability underneath, and that's the ideal scenario.
Garth, you brought up collaboration before, and most mid-sized organizations compete by being close to their customers and really understanding their customer needs. And Jim, you often talk about the VOC, the voice of the customer. Mm-hmm. So how do mid-sized organizations collaborate with their customers today, and what can they do to get better? How can they improve in that area?
Well, so much of collaboration today happens, in email and spreadsheets and back and forth conversations, whether it's teleconferences and maybe even some face-to-face meetings and those sorts of things. But there's a real fundamental flaw in all of that, because all of that happens offline. You've got all of this conversation happening around a product with valuable information, valuable knowledge, feedback being generated, and it's all maybe in somebody's head, but even then it's hard to remember those things later. So, ideally what we'd love to see is more of a social approach to it, so that, as feedback, is received and conversations are shared and decisions are made, you can go back and look at that, and it may be because something's, there may be something to focus on for this project, but also for the next one. When we come up with the next iteration of this project, what were the things the customers were asking us for, that voice of the customer? What did they say they would have liked in the product that maybe we couldn't get into the last release of the product, but maybe are accessible now? And being able to move that to a much more modern approach, as opposed to emails flying around and FTPing files, to really more of a discussion and a conversation that's captured for the future. That really is the way to make things happen. And you can't expect to send a supplier executive or a customer executive a CAD file or even a viewer file and have them hey, I'm going to go ahead and download a viewer, a plug-in to my to my browser. It needs to be much more natural and much more fluid, like the consumer apps that people are used to today. They should just be able to see it.
I would say that the online piece is the critical piece, because you got to collect all that knowledge and use it as reference. I agree 100%. And I would say that there's two elements of that. there's a lot of passive communication that happens, emails, surveys, that kind of thing, and those are good. But if you really want to get voice of customer, you need to be actively engaging, and the customer needs to be actively responding. And as I said before, you're not going to do that within the confines of your structured PLM system. You want to have a social system, as Jim says. But if that social system is disconnected, now, well, who's in that system? Social doesn't mean public, because maybe I have a small advisory group that I want to control on a confidential project, so you have to have some securities around the social element. And then when you have some good ideas, well, how do I extract those into ideas? And as I manage all these ideas and we have new product launches and things like that, which ideas kind of percolate up to the top and then become actionable? And how do we trace all of that and transfer it over to engineering so they understand the context of where that came from? And if I'm using different systems to do all that, you're going to have things lost in translation, or you're going to have to duplicate data entry, and the thing won't be valuable enough, and it may even lose value over time and then not be used at all. But what we do is we bring all those together. As I said before, we have the structured collaboration for the formal development process, and we have a social collaboration for product innovation. And those two things are on the same system, and they are connected. And that's really the innovation that we have, to connect those two worlds and bring them together so that you have the best potential to innovate and get things done and really meet that voice of customer.
Okay, so it actually allows customers and product managers, engineers to collaborate earlier in the design cycle so that they can truly understand what the customer needs are and then use that information and bring that into the design process itself?
And then, as things are getting done, engineers can collaborate back through that social system for ongoing validation because, as I said before, being model-based, we can start to do some virtual simulation and provide information back to that community so that customers can comment on that and say, hey, that's fitting the need or not. And you're allowed now to have this circular conversation. It's not a one-way thing anymore, and get real participation and active involvement to get your products done quickly and correctly.
Now I want to go back to earlier, Garth, you talked about the 3D Experience platform and how it's data-driven. So Tech Clarity did a study and found that over 30% of an engineer's time is wasted on non-value-added activities. And a lot of that time is spent in meetings or searching for and through files. How does a data-driven rather than a file-based approach help in terms of things like engineering productivity?
What we find in our research is that only about half of an engineer's time is being spent on value-added activities, on really focusing on, for example, innovation, engineering, design. And when you break down the other parts of what they're doing, a lot of it, as you said, is searching for files is one of the number one things. One of the second things is finding information for other people. And if you've got information lying around in files, it's hard to get at that information. It's hard to search based on what's inside a file. And as you start to move outside of the organization, wouldn't it be nice if manufacturing could access data directly? Well, manufacturing isn't going to be able to access information directly that's embedded in a CAD file. It needs to come out of those files and really be more, as you guys use the term, data-driven. It needs to be more accessible so people can search across that, and that's both for engineers but also for everybody around the product development process all the way through, production and support. All that information should be much more accessible than locked away in files.
Yeah, and I look at it, think of a file as like a book. And if I'm going to collaborate on a specific page or chapter of that book, I have to give you that whole book, and everyone has copies of the book. You can quickly see how that can disintegrate into chaos. But if we go data-driven, we're able to extract the pages out, and we can assemble those pages back into a book, but now I can collaborate on individual pages or individual parts of the page, and all of that is connected, and it's data that's driven that we can then rebuild the book as needed, but it's data that's driving it. And when you do that, now you expose not just the files, the book, but you have everything available now to search. So think of a phone book. You could look up by the person's name very easily, but if I gave you a number and I said, who does this belong to? good luck with that. But extracting all the data and exposing it allows you to search any which way you like. We also introduce a tagging mechanism so people can start to add tags to things, and the system will automatically add tags as well based on what you're doing. So now you have world-class searching across all of that data, filtering with the tagging to find what you need in a fraction of the time. But the other thing that's interesting to beyond search is that when you're data-driven on your processes, now what you can do is data can come to you when you need it. Instead of you having to go find it, it comes to you and says, hey, work on this now, and here's everything you need to do to get the work done. All the tasks, documents, everything gets pushed. So you can actually start to reduce your need to search altogether when you go data-driven. And when you do all that, now as a user, I can have all these different things coming to me. I can dashboard those. I can triage them, plan them accordingly. And as I get my work done, it gets reflected automatically into the project manager and other people that need to continue. And we call that invisible governance, where everything is connected, and I don't have to worry about pushing updates. People don't have to worry about collecting updates. The system drives all of that and invisibly manages all that for everyone.
Garth, you mentioned also project management and how that might be tied into user productivity. So obviously project management is so important to a program's success, yet most companies today use standalone tools such as MS Project to manage their project. So how does a project management application that's integrated with CAD help an organization?
I mentioned a couple things before, so this is pretty quick, because when you think of a tool, separate tool like MS Project, you've got a lot of things going on in a project. There's a lot of tasks to be done, and tasks produce things. I could have a task for the marketing collateral, and the marketing collateral needs to be produced. Or there's a task to do the design, and the design gets produced. And there's all kinds of other tasks going on. And as a project manager, if you're managing all these things, all of the deliverables that get created as part of that are often managed in so many different systems, and the project manager may or may not have access, and they got to manually track all the updates. And when you're doing file-based project management with file-based deliverables, it becomes very difficult and unruly to manage, and the project manager is spending a ton of time just getting updates. When you go data-driven with the project management, all the tasks, all the deliverables, everything gets connected as data. So the files are still there, but they're being connected through a data stream, and as those data streams update, the project updates. So the project manager doesn't have to track things, the system tracks things. And now the project manager, through invisible governance, gets updates and then can focus on real things like managing risk, managing budget, getting things done. And that's what we really call this invisible governance. And we have dashboards that get populated automatically. And you can imagine real-time access to real-time information allows to make much better decisions much more quickly versus making a decision on something that's 2 weeks out of date and maybe making a bad decision. We avoid all that when we go data-driven.
Yeah, and people shouldn't discount that. A lot of people, when they're looking at PLM systems, really are looking to improve, the design process directly, and they don't necessarily focus enough on the design projects and the overall product development projects that they sit within. And we've actually tied, we do in our research, we look at what top performing companies do versus others. And in one research study, the top performers, those that were really getting their projects done on time, on budget, et cetera, and hitting target costs, were actually showed that they were much better at managing design projects. So you shouldn't really discount the importance of projects when you're looking at a PLM system.
All right, good point, Jim. Thanks, Garth. So I'm going to conclude by asking each of you if you can give your recommendation for a mid-sized organization looking to improve the development process, and how would they get started? So, Jim, why don't we start with you?
I think two things are very clear from what I've seen over the years and from our research. The first is really look at what your business is doing today and look for a tangible problem to solve. Look for something that is either an inefficiency or an opportunity to work better with your customers and be more agile that you can't do now, and really do something important with your first implementation of PLM. The other thing, though, is to not just focus on that one area, to really have a broader view We have something we've called the PLM program, which is to take a programmatic view. Look at where you want to be in the long term. Do you want to manage things like material compliance, requirements, maybe something around systems? Those kinds of things that are really going to be available in a broader system. Understand where you want to be, but then take a small step to get there. And you don't want to paint yourself in the corner by putting in a system in the beginning that won't help you grow there.
Yeah, and I echo that. You certainly want to look beyond managing files. That's PDM, right? And the first logical step is to start managing the full product and start managing the full bill of materials. So bill of material management is really the first logical thing to bolt into managing files. But if I go back to Jim's survey, and if you look at the top performers versus the others, the biggest disparities between what top performers do versus others are finding the data I need, completing tasks efficiently, and sharing data with others. So those are the three things I think are the most important ones to begin with, which equals improved search because I'm managing the full product, I'm managing the bill of material, and I have all the data there so I can do the search. Being able to have invisible governance with our data-driven project management, and then being able to socially collaborate so you can effectively share data with everyone and connect that in to the real work that's going to happen. And that's what we're able to provide with our 3D Experience platform. And you're able to plug in those other things that Jim said. You want to get into materials compliance? Plug it in, add it in. All these things become apps that you can just add on to all the data that's already there.
Okay, that's great answers. I think you guys both offered some great insights. Should be of a lot of value to the many people listening to this webcast. So I appreciate that. And I encourage everyone who is listening to download Jim's ebook. Again, it was titled Finding PLM to Fit Mid-Sized Manufacturers. And there you can get a lot more detail on the topics that Jim and Garth discussed today. And again, thank you very much, Jim and Garth. Until next time.